What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to be talking about even more new iOS 26 features and changes. We have some bad news for the OLED MacBook Pro, and also some bad news for the iPhone 17 Pro, the crazy way in which Apple is losing some of its AI talent, a crazy AirTag story, and much more. And as always, if you want to continue staying updated with everything going on in the world of Apple, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, and also check out the Apple Den newsletter. Okay, so this week was an eventful one and a highly controversial one because on Monday we did see Apple release iOS 26 Beta 3 along with all the other software updates, the third beta updates, and iOS and iPadOS got the most controversy, of course, because we saw Apple kind of tone down the liquid glass design in Beta 3 compared to Beta 2. Now, liquid glass is still there, it's prominent, but it's just less intense as it was in Betas 1 and Betas 2. And when I say less intense, I mean that it's now more of like a frosted glass than it is a liquid glass. So you can see the comparisons. You guys probably already saw this in my Beta 3 What's New video, but that was all the talk this week. Now, of course, this is a beta, so this will continue to get tweaked and changed throughout the weeks and months, but that's what we saw with Beta 3. And I have to ask you guys, now that you've been using the software for a week now, how do you actually like the liquid glass design in Beta 3? Do you actually think it's a downgrade now that you've been using it, or do you think it's really not that big of a difference, or do you like it better than what we saw in Betas 1 and 2? Please let me know your thoughts down below because I'm very curious. And by the way, I've had a lot of people asking me what wallpaper I've been using throughout these iOS 26 betas, including the one I have on the screen right here. This is actually from my brand new wallpaper collection called Lustra. So this is now available. You can buy this wallpaper pack. There are several different wallpapers included. It's not just one set of wallpapers. As you guys know, I do a light version and a dark version for every single wallpaper, and they look stunning on iOS 26 and iPadOS 26 as well. So if you want to check them out, they're linked down in the description below as always. And if you are a member on the website, the brandonbutch.com website, you will get a discount or you will get them free. Also this week, Apple released a new beta firmware update for the AirPods 4 and the AirPods Pro 2. That version number is 8A5308B. So you can check your AirPods to see if they're up to date. Of course, now with iOS 26, it's easier than ever to actually get on the beta and kind of see what version you're on as well. So if you go ahead and enter your AirPods right here, and then we scroll down here to the bottom, you can see we have AirPods beta updates right there, and you can go ahead and enable them. It's much easier now to actually get the betas on your AirPods, which is great. Okay, so now let's talk about even more new iOS 26 features and changes that we have not covered just yet. So the first one is actually new in Beta 3, and this is something I noticed right away, but I really didn't know how to put my finger on it. Like I could tell there was a difference, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And that is when you go into the app switcher right here, you can see that it now shows the application that you were in right away in the forefront. So it's hard to explain, but basically when you pull up and go into the app switcher before, it would be like kind of right here. It'd be like it went to the second application, not the most recent application that you're in. It would go to the one that you were previously in. It would kind of push it over to the side. But now when you're in an application and you go into the app switcher, it keeps it right there centered. If you have an animated wallpaper in a message on iOS 26 and you do a tap back, you can see that we'll now have kind of a ripple effect in the background. If you didn't notice it there, check it out right here. So I'll do it right here. You can see the little ripple in the background right there. So that's a new animation. Might not be new, but I just noticed it after changing a different wallpaper in here. And also it's much easier to use and notice in Beta 3 because it's not as laggy as it was before. But you can see there are still issues with it. It is still a little bit laggy. It's not perfect, but it is better. Oh, and by the way, when you go into this section right here and you go over to backgrounds and photos, you can see that we have that liquid glass little animation there now in this section. That was not there before, at least not that I saw. Also on Beta 3, when you go to unlock your device, if your Face ID fails, or if you just need to unlock your device using a passcode, the wallpaper kind of gets darker now so that you can see the numbers easier. And then also in our settings, if you go into the sounds and haptics section and then you go down to microphone, this of course is where you can change the input for your microphone. That's been there since Beta 1. However, it's not working in Beta 3. So I tried this with like other mics, but it's not working properly in beta 3 like it was in beta 2. However, somebody on Reddit made me realize how this feature might be really useful for some people when in a car. So basically, if your car stereo does not have a microphone, it'll be awesome now because you can use your iPhone's microphone instead of trying to connect to a car stereo microphone that doesn't exist. Or probably more common is that if your car stereo's microphone, if your microphone in your car is just really bad, you could just use your iPhone microphone instead of it defaulting to your car's microphone. So this is just a great feature in general. I just wish it was actually working here in beta 3. It will be working, I'm sure, though, in beta 4. And speaking of the car, we also saw NFL team applications come to CarPlay. So with iOS 26, not even just iOS 26, the App Store in general, you know how there's different applications for specific teams like NFL teams? Well, we're now seeing that the company behind many of these applications, which is called Yinscam, they announced that the applications are now going to be supported for CarPlay. So these CarPlay apps will include team-specific podcasts, live radio, and more. Now, I mentioned how the car microphone wasn't working. Another thing I noticed that was not working in beta 3, really ever since beta 1, has been automations in the Shortcuts application. So I have multiple automations that typically run every single day on my main device, and they've really not been working like 80% of the time on iOS 26 beta. And with beta 3, it seems to be even worse than it was on betas 1 and betas 2. So I have a shortcut where basically the lock screen orientation lock is disabled when I go into YouTube, and then it re-enables when I go out of YouTube. That's not been working properly. And then also pretty much any automation that is supposed to run when your device is locked will just fail. It will not work. So that happens all the time when I get in my car. So hopefully Apple does fix up these automations as well. Make sure you guys are reporting feedback in the feedback application as well if you're encountering any issues. Now, we also just recently heard about some upcoming Maps features in iOS 26. So this comes from some code findings from Steve Moser over on X. So we're hearing that we're going to see natural language support for search in Maps. So you could use natural language to find places like best coffee shops with free Wi-Fi. And then also more interestingly is this feature right here that says when an iPhone begins to overheat, Maps will now be able to override the always on screen setting for turn-by-turn navigation, and it will allow the display to turn off to help the device cool down and prevent potential damage or performance throttling. If we head into the new games application on iOS 26, and then we go over to the arcade section, if you are an Apple Arcade subscriber, we're going to have 4 new games for August on August 7th. So we have Play-Doh World, which is the big one they've been announcing and kind of promoting. Also Worms Across Worlds, Let's Go Mighty Cat, and Everybody Shogi. So all those games will be coming next month in early August. So Apple Arcade, as I always say, great subscription if you are into gaming on your iPhone or iPad. Okay, so let's talk about the performance and the battery life with iOS 26 Beta 3, because I've been using this quite a bit this past week because I have been traveling. That's also why you're seeing this video on Sunday instead of Saturday. I've been using my phone constantly throughout the week when traveling away from home. So I've really got a good sense for the performance and the battery life now with 26 Beta 3. I always do anyways here at home, but I've just had like extra use cases for iOS 26. And honestly, performance has not been bad with iOS 26 Beta 3. Now I have to say that when you do go into low power mode, the performance is terrible, way worse than it was in iOS 18. So if I go in here and then I go into low power mode, I don't even have adaptive power mode on, but when I go into low power mode, the performance is just extremely throttled, extremely laggy in every single interface I go into. So I've just learned that with iOS 26, I'm not going to go into low power mode at all because it's not worth it with as much lag as I receive. But aside from that, I haven't had any reboots. I have had applications freeze where I had to force close out of them, which has been pretty annoying, but I've not had any resprings happen. So that's good. Performance definitely better on beta 3 than it has been on beta 2 or beta 1, but it's still not great. Like you can still tell it's a beta when you're using it. Now, as far as battery life goes, I have my main phone here that I've been using for the past week on this software. So you can see here that, every single day pretty much I've been still getting over 100%. So I've been using over 100% of my battery, which means I have to charge it at least once, sometimes where I get over 200%, at least twice during the day. So clearly battery life is still not great here with beta 3, but thankfully it was better than beta 2. Thankfully, because I was without a charger a lot of the times, or just a portable charger, so you can see that battery life using quite a bit of battery across the board. So if I go to this 204% battery day, you can kind of see what was using up all of the battery there. So battery life still not great, as I said, but it's now actually usable, I would say. Like, not bad, but also not great. So it's kind of what I said in the beta 3 what's new video. I kind of had a sense that battery life would be a little bit better than it was before, but it's not a significant difference. So hopefully with beta 4 we will see that more significant difference. Okay, so now let's talk about what to expect next from Apple. And next up, I believe, is going to be iOS 26 developer beta 4. Yes, I do not think that we're going to see the public beta after beta 3. I think, at least, this is just my opinion, by the way. We don't know anything for sure yet. Apple has not announced an official release. But, as of beta 3 and, all the issues that are still ongoing, along with the whole dilemma with liquid glass and the design, I just feel like it's not ready for a public beta yet. So I feel like if Apple did release the iOS 26 public beta on Monday the 14th, which is when a lot of people, I think most people are predicting it on that day, I'm just going to say I don't think it's happening. I don't think that we're going to see the public beta next week, just based on the whole liquid glass issue right now. I know it's still a beta, but still there's a lot going on, with iOS 26 right now, that it just seems like it makes more sense to get iOS 26 public beta after developer beta 4. So my guess is that we're not going to see public beta next week. I would love to see it on Monday the 14th. It's still a possibility, or even the 15th. It's still a possibility. However, I'm going to guess that we're going to see the public beta either on the week of the 21st, or even the final week of July is a possibility, the week of the 28th. However, I do think it's going to come after developer beta 4. So iOS 26 developer beta 4, the next release for anybody on the developer beta program right now, that's going to be on the week of the 21st. So we're still on a 2-week release schedule right now. So we should have a pretty quiet week next week. Now, I think the more likely scenario next week is going to be an iOS 18.6 beta. So if you still are on iOS 18.6, we could be seeing that next week. But as far as iOS 26 goes, I think next week is going to be a pretty quiet week for that. So I hope Apple proves me wrong. I hope they do release the public beta next week, but it just seems more likely that it's going to be later on in the month of July. So we'll have to wait and see. And of course, if anything changes, I will keep you guys updated here on the channel, as I usually do. Okay, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. And let's start with Apple losing some of its top AI talent to Meta. And that's because right now, Mark Zuckerberg and Meta are going absolutely all out on investing in AI and hiring and kind of poaching people away from other companies with crazy amounts of money to join their super intelligence team. So we're hearing that Mark Zuckerberg and Meta are paying these AI engineers and these AI employees from other companies $100 million or more, sometimes $200 million or more. That's like more than CEOs that are getting paid for just being an employee with AI. So that's insane. And we just heard this week that Apple AI engineer Ruming Peng was poached for over $200 million. That is insane. So this guy Peng, he led Apple's AI models team. But Apple did not try to match the offer. Of course, $200 million is crazy, since it's obviously far beyond typical non-CEO pay levels at Apple. And that is not the first, or probably not the last, AI employee at Apple that has left the company. So this one was understandable. I mean, if somebody's offering you $200 million as an employee, you'd be kind of crazy to not take that. And that's kind of telling of the AI environment right now and how serious this is getting. And speaking of big money that we cannot relate to, we have to talk about Apple landing a US F1 streaming rights deal. So we're hearing, according to Business Insider, that Apple is poised to land the US Formula One streaming rights, outbidding ESPN with a $150 million a year offer that starts next year in 2026. So of course, right now, ESPN is currently paying around $85 million a year to have the streaming rights to F1 in the US, and they apparently are not planning to match Apple's bid, which, it's like double the amount, because Business Insider said at least $150 million a year. So it could be even more than that. And this would mark Apple's third pro sports streaming deal. So of course, they have MLB and they also have MLS. So So this would be another big one to add to their arsenal when it comes to sports. But of course, Apple right now is missing the main one, the holy grail for US streaming, and that is NFL. We've heard for years that Apple has been trying to get a deal to get the NFL streaming rights, but that's the one that they still do not have. And of course, it seems like Apple is all in on F1 right now because they did have the F1 movie, which did really well at the box office. I saw it myself. I thought it was a great film, and I'm sure there will be a sequel as well. So Apple is pretty invested in F1 as a sport right now. Now we have to talk about the iPhone 17 Pro and why a lot of people might be not too happy about the design, and more specifically about the materials used, because we're now hearing that the iPhone 17 Pro models will have an aluminum frame with a glass section on the back of the devices to preserve MagSafe and Qi wireless charging support. And this comes from Instant Digital on Weibo. And this is pretty big news because since the iPhone 10 in like 2017, every high-end model of the iPhone has been either stainless steel on the frame or titanium on the frame. So this would be the first time that for the highest end models, Apple is going back to aluminum on the frame. So it'll be really interesting to see. Of course, there is still going to be glass in there, but it's going to be aluminum frame according to these rumors. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Apple markets this and what their reasoning behind it is, because it's going to have to be pretty compelling and make a pretty big difference, since a lot of people are probably not going to be happy about the downgrade, at least in the feel of the phone in the hand, from stainless steel or titanium. And keep in mind, this is not the only person saying we're going to see an aluminum frame on the Pro models. We also heard this from Wayne Ma at The Information earlier. But that's not the only piece of bad news that we have, because we're also hearing that the OLED MacBook Pro, which I know a lot of people, a lot of you guys as well, have been wanting a redesigned MacBook Pro with a better OLED screen. We're now hearing, according to Mark Gurman, that that might not be launching next year after all. So he says this: the company had been planning to release its new 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros later this year with M5 chips, but Apple is now internally targeting a launch early next year, meaning that the current MacBook Pro release cycle may last a little longer than usual. When they do roll out, the M5 MacBook Pro line will be the last with the current design. The follow-up models will include new cases and a move to OLED. So we are getting new MacBook Pros potentially next year, which it was expected later this year, but it might be early next year instead. That's going to be the M5 MacBook Pro. Pretty minor change across the board, really just a spec bump, but it's not going to be until the follow-up where we see the OLED screen and the new case design, all of that. So that's what everybody's waiting on, but based on this release, we might not be seeing that now until 2027, unfortunately. But it's not all bad news on this episode, because we are hearing about some products coming early next year, such as the iPhone 17e with the A19 chip, and Gurman is saying that this will look very similar to the 16e, just with a better chip. Along with that, we are expecting a new entry-level iPad and iPad Air, both with minor upgrades. Again, most likely just a spec bump there. But also the new MacBook Airs are coming early next year, along with Apple's follow-up to the Apple Studio Display. So I'm really curious to see if Apple can outdo the Studio Display, because as you guys know, I have two of those. I love them. I'll be really curious to see what Apple does with their next monitor. And then, of course, the ever-elusive Smart Home Hub, whatever it ends up being called, that is expected in the first half of next year as well. That has been delayed a couple of times, but we are still expecting it to come next year, at least in the first half of next year. And then finally, just as tradition, we have another crazy AirTag story. So this time, a young woman in Florida was with a friend in her car when the friend noticed an unknown AirTag alert pop up on her phone. So of course, they checked the car and eventually found an AirTag that was hidden inside the rear cargo compartment. So the woman took it straight to law enforcement, and the police opened up an investigation. Turns out the AirTag had pinged 15 times over just 1 week, a 1-week period, and deputies traced it back to her ex-boyfriend, a 21-year-old man around the Naples area. And by the way, just a fun fact, guys, if you do get an AirTag and if you ever try to do anything like this, never do that, because if you scan the AirTag, they can see, Apple can actually give law enforcement the information about who that AirTag belonged to. Anyways, the man was arrested and charged with unlawful surveillance, and according to the arrest report, the man had been obsessive and controlling, and deputies said that he was clearly fixated on knowing where she was and who she was with. So the 21-year-old did bond out of jail, and when he did, he denied the whole thing, saying, quote, "That's not not true at all, and even claimed that she might have just found one of his old AirTags in her car and made up the entire story. But of course, law enforcement was not buying it, nor am I buying that. So this is just another good reminder that if you see an unknown AirTag alert, to take it very seriously, and especially as a woman, you got to be really careful in these situations. It could happen to men or women, but I've covered hundreds of these stories, and like 90% of them, it happens to a woman as the victim. So just be careful out there, please. And thank goodness for the AirTag. Otherwise, this young woman would have never known that she was being tracked. Anyways, guys, that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. Also, be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And by the way, if you guys are following me over on Instagram, you would have seen this week that I posted a lot of behind the scenes at Samsung's Galaxy Unpacked event. So I was at the event out in Brooklyn. That's where I was at all week. And I was testing out the new Galaxy Fold 7 and the Z Flip 7. I actually really love those phones. Like, I'm obviously going to stick to iPhone forever, but at least for the time being. But I do love using these new Samsung phones. So if you guys want to see some Samsung content, let me know down in the comments below as well. I think it's always cool to kind of see what else is out there. So I do plan on posting some of that soon. I just wanted to give you guys an update on that. But anyways, thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon.